evening, or good night, folks. I'm your host, Simon Redhanded, and welcome back to Gaming Redhanded. I have been pretty busy at work, stuff like that, and I've gotten around to finally getting my Pathfinder to maps. I've been trying very hard to make this bleeding concoction Pathfinder work, and I gotta say, I'm probably at the point where I gotta tap out with this character for now, because I just don't think the tools are in the early access right now to make this character work. Now, I leveled with this character right from level 22, and pretty much all the gear I have on right now is solo self-found, except for these two rings, where I had to go out of my way to buy these rings because I couldn't solve the flash charge issue. And I tried a lot of things, but like this build itself struggles with damage. Right now, I'm at 4 link. The links come at certain intervals. I don't remember the exact levels, and its DPS is about 4,500. And honestly, I have gone all over this skill tree here. I respec this tree hundreds of times. I've gone through about a couple 100,000 gold just trying to figure out a way to make this build work. I just don't see it. Now, I know people use Widowhail for some of these concoction builds. You know, I'll show you what Widowhail does. 150 to 250% increased bonuses gained from your equipped quiver. So this requires you to roll a pretty decent quiver in order to scale that to get damage from it. I just don't see that being viable. I've seen some people pull out some interesting damage with like poison concoction. The absolute lack of proliferation with bleeds, the inability to actually pull out interesting mechanics and combos with bleeds means there's nothing much you're gonna do with this. There's no supports for it, and when you go into the support skill tree for bleeding concoction, like if you get your level 1 supports, the first thing it tells you to get is lacerate, which all lacerate does is give you a 50% chance to bleed, increase bleeding. Bleeding concoction always bleeds. So from the jump, you're suggested a dead support. And that just tells you the path this is going to be on. From the beginning of the game, you're basically set on a track where this skill is going to fail because, you know, you don't need lacerate. It doesn't increase damage. It doesn't give you any multipliers, nothing like that. It just gives you 50% chance to inflict bleeding on a skill that always bleeds. My lacerate right now, I have close combat, I have brutality, I have physical mastery, I have splinter, because I was trying to mess with armor. I did another tree on using the mobilytics site to redo my trees, and I was like, all right, maybe I'll go towards getting increased damage when I break armor, because maybe that'll help. Now, admittedly, I have no problem killing bosses. It's just mapping is disgusting, right? And to the point where like it's so slow that you can't really kill anything fast enough to deal with all the damage coming in. There's only 2 sources of increased ailment speed, damage infliction speed. So when I go in the tree here and I type in ailments deal damage, the only sources of increased damage from ailments is this, which is fast acting toxins. This is just a global increase, and this gives you roughly, so it's 12 here, 6 here, 5 here, 5 here. So altogether, you're getting 22% increase ailment damage built into speed, and then you get this one here, which is another 10%. And that's it. There's nothing else. Your gem, if you find a way to get quality on this thing, which I have no idea how to put quality on this thing, it gives you 20% faster. But I've tried using gem cutters. You cannot put quality on ascendancy skills. One of my bleeding concoctions can usually kill them off from full life to dead. It takes forever to do that. So you end up just spamming, and you end up just using the damage from the base damage of the skill to kill them, because the bleeding speed is so slow and you can't increase it. And then when you look through the tree of all the skills available for bleed, the passives, you have 3 clusters so far that give you bleed. Actually, it's 4, right? You have this cluster here, this cluster here, this cluster here, and then these ones here are just very hyper specific, right? This one requires jagged ground, and this one requires empowering, which these are 2 mechanics that are functionally impossible to pull off with bleeding concoction. My issue with this is this gives you increased bleeding magnitude when you crit, and it's not even that much. So you gotta jump through hoops to get your crit rate up just to get increased magnitude, just to make this one worthwhile. And it gives you the ability to aggravate when you crit, but there's a complete lack of crit, right? Like there's no crit on the tree. Scaling crit in general without a main hand weapon is it's damn near impossible. So you look at the tree here and you search what critical hit chance is available. You have this critical hit chance, which is only we haven't crit recently. So this is fine, but this is counterintuitive. Like eventually this is not gonna be helpful. It's good for the initial crit. You get some crit here for this accuracy cluster. You get crit here if you do the 5-point investment to get here. They get 30% chance to crit against bleeding enemies. There's some crit down here. There's some crit here, but not much. So I've already done a tree where I took all of these nodes. I took this node, this node, this node, this node, and I was able to get 13% chance to. There's no crit support gem, nothing like that. All the crit support gems that are available in the game have some asinine downside to them, so you can't really make them work the way you want them to work. So let me go in here and show you. We have Exile here that adds an 8-second cooldown, which is Christ, right? It's a crazy long cooldown to your main skill. Ambush only works against enemies that are full life, makes it functionally useless. Inevitable crit gives you 25% increased critical strike chance each second up to 100 seconds. However, this critical hit chance is lost whenever you actually crit. I guess it's okay. Potential, you can't generate skill charges. Supported skills will consume a power charge on him. I used this for a bit, and I used it in combination with Lingering Illusion, and that was giving me power charges, and it just wasn't worth using. And the reason why it wasn't worth using is because it still wasn't enough crit to make it worthwhile. Super critical is also here. It gives you 100% increased critical damage bonus. Supported skills have 20% less crit chance, which is super counterintuitive because I'm already having trouble getting base crit chance. So to reduce my crit chance even further is bananas, right? So I just didn't know what I'm supposed to do here. I don't know how to make this bleeding concoction any better than it is. And the fact that it's the skill tied to the Pathfinder Ascendancy just kind of irritates me, because you look at the Pathfinder Ascendancy, and while this skill is interesting because it has a bunch of different skills attached to it, all the other concoctions are attached to it, the rest of this tree is useless for this skill. If I were to give feedback on what to do with bleeding concoction, it would be one of two things. Either change it so that when you pick this, it changes these to something else, or remove this from this class altogether and just make this a skill gem that anyone can use. But the fact that it's an Ascendancy skill gem, and the fact that the only thing this Ascendancy supports is poison directly, means that every other concoction in this kit is dead because you can't scale it. Now, when you do poison concoction, you can see where the damage comes from. Like it scales proliferation comes from here. You get double your poison stacks, and it's like you get a bunch of supports in here. It's fine. It takes more effort, and you're probably better off using a poison bow skill, but you can at least make poison concoction work with this Ascendancy if you chose it. But you can't make bleeding concoction work. You can't make explosive concoction work. You can't make fulminating concoction work. You can't make, I don't know what the other one is. I don't remember the name right now, but you cannot make the other concoctions work at all as long as the only supports that it has for it is this additional skill point. And then the flash charge is a huge problem. You're not able to actually make this Ascendancy work without this. So you can't really rush this. And if you go through and try to get all the increased flash charges gained on this Ascendancy, you just have no damage. I tried getting this wheel here for the flash charges gained, flash charges gained, flash charges gained, and then this, and that was okay. But it was just such a loss in damage, and I just couldn't get to it. So right now I've been trying to make it work with this Arcane Alchemy and this. I've been able to kill every boss so far, but the problem is if I beat a rare mob that has increased energy shield, because poison doesn't go through energy shield, not poison, now bleeding doesn't go through energy shield, I have run out of mana to the point where I'd have to open a town portal and go back to town because the flash charge gain is so slow, right? But all the flask clusters are, first of all, most of them are useless because of the fact that we no longer have utility flasks. All of these during flask duration are completely useless to you because your flasks stop when you're full, right? So when this is saying increase attack speed during any flask effect, there's a few others here where increase crit damage during flask effect. None of that can be used because your flask turns off once you're full life. And you can't even use them when you're not full life, right? So your only option to make any of these flask clusters work is to already have Enduring Elixir. And it's only for your life flask. And it says when your unreserved life is filled, the flask effect is not removed. That's the only way to make use of any of these clusters that give you increased damage or whatever on effect. Fine. The problem becomes, everyone knows it's damn near impossible to do your 4th Ascendancy. I have the six additional passive points, and I still don't have enough damage to make this skill work. I still don't have enough utility to make the skill work. I can't even go to defensive clusters because it's like there's nothing around, right? So this is the starting area for the Pathfinder, because I assume GGG understands that the Pathfinder is the only class that can use this bleeding concoction. And when you type in physical, there's only one physical cluster over here, and it's not that great. 55% physical damage if you take the entire cluster, and that's it. There's no other physical damage in this area. This skill is a AoE projectile physical. AoE skill doesn't work. I tried this cluster here, which is attack damage, attack area damage, attack area damage, all this. None of this works, even though it has an AoE tag. Doesn't work. projectile scaling does work, but even here, there's not much projectile scaling on this tree, which is kind of crazy. Like I go to projectile scaling, and besides the opening cluster nodes here, which they're not that great, you have these travel nodes to get out, right? So altogether there's 10, 10, 10, 10. I think this is no damage here, so there's 40% here, and then you can go over here to get another 25%. You have this here, which is 10, 10, and then 16. This is a 3-point cluster for 50% projectile damage in exchange for reduced attack speed, which is it's fine. It's a poison, it's a bleed build, so you don't really need that much attack speed. So this is probably the strongest 3-point clusters you have on this side, and then the other projectile nodes are all the way down here, right? They're all the way down here, but they're not that great. I mean, this is all right, 12, 12. 25, or this is from long range, but bleeding concoction doesn't have that much range anyway, so this one's almost useless. And then down here I've been using this cluster as well. This is 40% for 3 points, but this is also another reduced speed. It's also a negative cluster, right? I tried getting all the magnitude nodes for the bleeding concoction, but the magnitude is just like this is probably the best bleeding cluster in the game right now, just because it gives you accuracy, which you need, and damage you deal inflicts 10% faster, and it gives you 60% increased damage against bleeding targets. So this is a pretty strong cluster here with these two nodes. However, it's just that magnitude is so weak that it doesn't really matter. I have all this magnitude. I have this magnitude here. I have this magnitude over here. I have had both of them, but I took this one off just because it wasn't making a difference to me. I have this magnitude here, and I'm going to be getting this magnitude over here. Right now with this much magnitude, like I'll calculate it up. This is 40% magnitude altogether. I tried using deep cuts. Deep cuts reduced my hit damage by so much that anytime something with energy shield showed up, I would just be fucked. So I had to take deep cuts off because I needed the actual damage more than I needed that magnitude. And then you look at it, it's like it's not enough magnitude to justify the amount of damage loss you're getting. I wish it was, but it's not. It's just not. And it's reflected in the DPS too, because I don't know, the DPS doesn't calculate your bleeding, but as long as your bleeding doesn't increase how fast it ticks and it doesn't stack, it will never be better to have more magnitude than just flat damage, right? Supports I've been using, right? So I've been using Splinter because I break armor. It's fine. It's been pretty decent. I've had it on Staggering Palm, so I was using those together because it's the only combination you could do with the unarmed is that. Everything else is just like I don't know what else to really do to pull out damage. I was moving around with cap block chance, but I kind of lost my block chance cap when I started moving towards getting over here. Like I just started doing this and I ran a gold trying to make this swap over. But once I get this cluster over here, my block chance will be capped again. Initially when I was leveling, like when I made it to maps the first day, I was down here with this dual socket. So I had this, and this cluster, and that was enough for me to be fully blocked. Now I probably can get back and do that, but I just needed more. I don't think that Pathfinder is viable right now as a bleeding build. I mean, it could be done with the poison, maybe. It could be done maybe if you get some fucking mirror tier quiver, and then you put it with Widow Hail, then maybe you could be done. But right now, it's just there's just not enough proliferation, and I think proliferation is your biggest problem. While you can kill things, you're gonna have to dodge and all that shit. So maps take a painful amount of time because you just have to slowly work your way through them because you don't have enough AoE. And the fact that AoE scaling doesn't work at all despite having an AoE tag means that you're just not going to do anything with this gem. So this is probably one of the first builds I'm just going to outright trash. My trash, I mean, I'm just going to leave it here. Like, I'm not going to do anything else with it. I've been moving with this. Bleeding you inflicted aggravated for the entirety of this game. And because this is so weak, it tells me that this cluster is also worthless because aggravate damage is just so low that it's not going to help you. They have to redo these clusters. Every one of these bleeding clusters are just so painfully worthless. Every one of these large nodes are painfully worthless. These 10% chance to aggravate on hit, bleeds you, inflict more than 4 seconds of aggravate, just fucking useless. It's all of it is garbage. And over here, 20% chance to aggravate when you critically hit, it's also garbage because you don't have enough chance to crit. It's odd to me that these bleed clusters kind of made it into the game because there's not enough here to make bleed work. I think that maybe when they add in, I'm gonna assume axes have more bleeds tied to them, and maybe when they add the rest of the bleed skills, they'll adjust these clusters. But everything right now makes bleeding builds impossible to do. I had to use these glow swarm rings because I had my ability to get my flash charges up were near impossible, and the fact that I can't do this build at all if I remove one of these rings is kind of crazy to me. If I take any of these rings off, which you have to buy them, you're not going to solo self-found this shit. You have to buy these rings if you want to use them, and you have to buy them perfectly rolled. They cannot be below 2.5, right? And the problem is, even with both these rings, even with the increased flash recovery and all that stuff there, it's still not good enough. Like I said, I started reducing it down because like it wasn't helping. I was still running out of mana, but I was just wasting an absurd amount of skill points getting these clusters here to try to make my mana. Because if you look at it, this cluster doesn't work. This 10% chance for your flash you use to not consume charges doesn't work because you're not using the flask. So this doesn't trigger it. This combat alchemy doesn't work. Increased charges gain does work, but when you look at what sources of increased charges gain actually exist, you have this cluster here, which is 15, 15, 15, so 45% altogether. You have this cluster here, 10, 8, 8, and then another 20. So altogether that 46% increase. And then you have here, which you have 10, 10, 10 on this side, because this does not give you increased flash charges gain. It gives you flask effect, which is useless in this game. A flask effect in this game is only increased mana recovery, right, from your mana or increase life. It's not like we have the same utility flask on PoE1, so increased flask effect is actually a trash stat. You don't need it. This cluster sucks. Like deep wounds could have been good, but it's like you need ailment duration, right? So the ailment duration here, you get these. So right now my bleed has no duration. I have no duration anymore. So my base chance to bleed without any duration is lasting 3.8 seconds. You get ailment duration from here. When I had these before, I got to like 4.2 seconds of bleed. So that means for 0.2 seconds, I'll have aggravated bleed. Over here, you can get 5% here, 5% here, 15% here, 25% chance. That would get me up to like maybe 4.8 seconds, right? We're almost at a full second of aggravated bleed. I don't believe this. This is not duration. This is not duration. This is just ailment. We have some more ailment duration over here, right here, which is 20%. So maybe if I had all these nodes, I would get to a grand whopping 1.2 seconds of aggravation. But my problem is I'm trying to find a way to get rid of this goddamn chest piece because this chest piece sucks. But I need bleed aggravation, but the bleed aggravation in this game that's available to you for the tree is so conditional that it's almost useless. This would be fine if I wasn't using flash charges as my fucking resource. I cannot spam my attack because if you haphazardly throw your concoction, you will run out of flash charge before you get enough. So this 10% chance is so low that it's not even worth getting this. Like, I mean, I've been working my way through this cluster because I want the jewel socket, but then as I've been going through it, I'm just like, this is not good enough for me to take off this. This is not good enough for me to take off this. This is not good enough for me to take off this. And these are the only three sources of bleed aggravation. Well, there's also this, but this is jagged ground. This would work. If I was playing bleed with a warrior, I could make this work. Bleed with totems, I can make this work. But this one here requires jagged ground. Jagged ground is only formed by slams or seismic totem, so I can't make this one work. Not enough crit available in the game, and the way the crit works in this game is so fucking cumbersome that this one is worthless. This would probably be the best option if you could get up to 100% crit chance. Now there's a boot that exists that does aggravation if you're close range, but the boot also sucks. But I probably could get away with that. It might be better to use the boot because your chest piece has more stats available to it than I could use. But it's just, I don't know. So yeah, if you're thinking about playing a Pathfinder, I think your only options are to do poison. I think a lot of the skills available to Pathfinder, well, the entire ascendancy is kind of shitty, right? Like this path here is shit. Everything here is garbage, you know, like, so this entire tree, like, I don't even see a scenario where you'd ever choose anything down this branch. The additional 6 skill points would have been cool, but I think there should be more. It does. I think that it should be additional skill points, but also increased effect of these skill points that you get. Then maybe it'd be worth an ascendancy. But even I thought this would be good, but it's just not. 6 points is not enough. This is not good enough unless it changes these to something else to reflect the concoction. But as it is now, because this is hard coded as poison damage, it means the only concoction you should be using is poison concoction. And at the same time, it's just like, why? Why is this here? Just take out fucking skills from the ascendancies. Move them into the skill gems. I just don't like them. I just don't like ascendancies having skills tied to them. Because unless you're going to heavily support the skills with the ascendancies, it doesn't make sense, right? I kind of wish this was over here and not tied to the end of this, so it could be, you know, you could get a level 3 or a level 1 or start off with it. Maybe be better if I could play this with maybe enduring elixirs and I could start considering doing a during flask effect build, then maybe better. But the fact that I need to do Uber Lab or whatever the fuck it is now in order to get this is just like, I don't know how to make this build pull out the damage I need to do. Anyway, thank you guys for giving me your time. I appreciate you guys dropping by as always. Have yourselves a good morning. If this is the only video you watch of me today, good afternoon or good night.